Ethan Cole walked slowly through the quiet halls of the old station. He had been told not to enter the ruins that were buried under the research site, but his curiosity was stronger than the rules. The walls were old metal, rusted and broken in places, and dust filled the air. Each step he took echoed like he was walking inside the chest of a sleeping giant. He kept moving forward, even though his heart was beating faster. He found a narrow door hidden behind collapsed panels. It was locked at first, but the old system had no power. With a few careful pulls, he managed to open it. Beyond the door was a chamber that looked untouched by time. The air felt colder, and the silence inside was heavier. He stepped in, his boots making small marks in the thin layer of dust on the floor. In the middle of the room was a pod made of glass and steel. Inside was a young woman. She looked like she was asleep, her body still, her face calm. Ethan froze in shock. He had expected machines or empty rooms, not a person. The glass cover slid open with a faint hiss, as if the room had been waiting for him. The girl opened her eyes slowly, blinking against the light. She gasped and sat up quickly. She was unclothed, and her hands moved fast to cover herself. Her face turned red with surprise and fear. Ethan quickly turned his eyes away. He raised his hands to show he meant no harm. His voice shook as he spoke, saying he was sorry for entering, and that he did not mean to disturb her. She did not answer at first. Her breathing was fast, her chest rising and falling as she tried to understand what was happening. After a long pause, the girl spoke in a soft voice. She asked where she was and who he was. Ethan explained his name and that this place was part of an outpost, far from the cities of Earth. She listened, her eyes wide, as if she did not believe him. Then she whispered her name, Clara. The name sounded heavy, like it carried a story older than both of them. Clara looked around the chamber and touched the pod she had just left. She said it had been her bed for a long sleep, she told him. She was not supposed to wake until someone worthy found her. Ethan felt cold run down his back. He had not expected any of this. It felt like he had stepped into someone else's dream. He offered her his coat and she pulled it around herself, her hands shaking as she held it tight. She asked about the year. When he told her, she looked down at the floor, her lips parting in disbelief. She whispered that too much time had passed, that everything she knew was gone. Suddenly, alarms lit up across the chamber. Red lights blinked, and old speakers crackled with noise. Clara grabbed his arm with a grip stronger than he thought she had. She said the awakening was not meant to be quiet. The systems had called out, and now others would know. Ethan wanted to ask more, but her fear spread into him. The whole place seemed alive now, like the walls had eyes. He pulled her close and told her they had to leave. She nodded, still holding the coat, her bare feet stepping carefully on the cold floor. Together they rushed back through the broken hallway. Ethan could not stop thinking about how unreal it all felt. He had come searching for old metal and forgotten machines. Instead, he had found Clara, a girl from another time, a girl who should not have been alive, but was. Her eyes carried both fear and strength, and he knew that his life had changed forever the moment the glass pod opened. Ethan and Clara moved quickly through the cold halls of the old outpost. The alarms from the chamber still echoed in his head, even though the sound had faded. Clara held his coat tightly around her body, her eyes sharp and full of fear. She walked close beside him, almost like she was afraid the walls themselves would take her back. When they reached the surface level of the outpost, the air felt different. It was brighter, warmer, and filled with the hum of working machines. Clara stopped and stared at the ceiling lights as if they were stars. She whispered that the world had changed. Ethan watched her closely, still unsure if she was real or if he was caught in some strange dream. He guided her to a small room where he stayed when he was off duty. He gave her water, and she drank it slowly, her hands trembling as if she had never held a cup before. After a long silence, she began to speak. She told him she was not just anyone. She said her family had ruled a kingdom long ago, a human kingdom that had left Earth during a dark time. She said her mother had been Queen Margaret, and she herself had been prepared to lead if the world fell apart. Ethan listened in shock. He wanted to believe her, but her words sounded like stories from old books. He asked her how long she had been asleep. Clara looked down and whispered that she had lost count. She only knew that she had been placed in the pod to keep her safe, until she was needed again. Her voice cracked when she said that she thought her people would come for her, but no one had. He felt a mix of pity and fear. If what she said was true, she carried a history forgotten by the rest of humanity. If it was not true, then she was a girl broken by too much time in the dark. But when he looked at her eyes, he saw strength and sadness that no lie could make. Suddenly a knock came at the door. Ethan jumped. Clara's hand gripped his arm. He opened the door to find Daniel Carter, a medic from the outpost, standing there. Daniel asked why alarms had gone off near the ruins. Ethan froze, not knowing what to say. Clara stayed hidden behind him, her face pale with fear. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He asked again what Ethan had found. Ethan finally said there had been movement in the ruins, and he had gone to check. He said the systems had powered up on their own. Daniel looked doubtful, but did not press further. He warned Ethan to stay clear of the ruins and left. When the door closed, Clara asked in a whisper if she could trust anyone here. Ethan thought for a long moment before telling her that trust was rare in a place like this. But he promised her she could trust him. She nodded, though the fear did not leave her eyes. Later that night, Clara sat by the window, looking out at the stars. She asked what had become of Earth, if people still remembered kings and queens. Ethan told her the truth, that Earth no longer had rulers like that, and that people now chose their leaders. Clara seemed to break a little inside when she heard this. She whispered that her mother's plan had failed, and that her own place in the world was gone. Ethan wanted to comfort her, but he did not know how. Instead, he sat beside her, silent, letting her know she was not alone. She leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes, whispering her mother's name one last time before sleep took her. As he watched her, Ethan felt the weight of something larger than himself. This was not just about an old chamber or a forgotten pod. Clara carried a secret that others would want. He knew the alarms had already spread word of her awakening. Deep inside, he feared they would soon come looking for her. Outside, the stars shone cold and distant. Inside, the girl who called herself heir to a queen slept under his coat. Ethan sat awake, wondering if tomorrow would bring truth or danger, and if he was ready for either. The next morning came with tension in the air. Ethan woke early, but Clara was already awake, standing near the window with her eyes fixed on the horizon. She looked lost in thought, her hands still wrapped in the coat he had given her. When she turned to him, her face was serious. She said the alarms from the chamber meant someone else would come, and they would not let her remain free. Ethan knew she was right. Not long after, the silence of the outpost was broken by the sound of engines. A transport ship landed on the pad outside, stirring dust into the air. From it stepped Commander Jack Morris, a man known for his sharp eyes and hard voice. He was not part of the regular outpost staff. He had been sent by Central Command to investigate. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. He knew this was about Clara. Ethan and Clara stayed hidden in his small quarters. Through the thin walls, they could hear voices outside as Morris asked questions. He demanded to know who had entered the ruins and what had been found. Daniel the medic tried to answer carefully, but his words were not enough. Morris declared that he would search the area himself. Clara's hand shook as she held onto Ethan's arm. She whispered that Morris would not stop until he had her. Ethan asked her why she thought he was after her. Clara explained in a low voice that her family had left more than just her behind. There were vaults scattered across space, holding treasures, records, and secrets of the old monarchy. Only her bloodline could open them. Ethan's breath caught. It was not just her life that mattered. She was a key to something far greater. Clara looked into his eyes and asked if she should run. Ethan knew the outpost was small and guarded. Running would draw attention. He told her that for now, she should stay hidden. But deep inside, he wondered how long they could keep this secret. Later, Commander Maurice himself knocked on Ethan's door. Ethan opened it slowly, trying to keep calm. Maurice asked straight if Ethan had found anything in the ruins. His voice carried no warmth, only sharp control. Ethan replied that he had seen some machines activate, but nothing else. Maurice studied his face with cold eyes, then stepped closer as if searching for a crack in his words. After a long pause, Maurice finally left, warning Ethan not to lie again. When the door shut, Clara stepped out from the shadows. Her face was pale. She told Ethan that Maurice would not believe him, and that soon he would return. She whispered that maybe it was better if she gave herself up, that perhaps they would not harm her if she obeyed. Ethan shook his head quickly. He told her that people like Morris only wanted power. Once they had it, they would use her until nothing was left. Clara looked down, silent, but her eyes showed she knew he was right. The day passed with heavy quiet. Soldiers searched the ruins and set guards around the outpost. Clara could not move freely, and Ethan stayed close to her, bringing food and water while avoiding attention. At night, Sophia Lewis, a pilot and one of Ethan's few friends, came to his room. She had seen Clara by accident when the door opened. Instead of sounding an alarm, she listened to Ethan's hurried words. Sophia was cautious, but she agreed to help. She too did not trust Commander Maurice. Clara thanked Sophia with a quiet voice. She admitted she was afraid, but also said she could not keep hiding forever. She had to face what her bloodline meant, even if the world no longer wanted queens. Ethan looked at her and saw something change in her eyes. Fear was still there, but now it mixed with strength. Outside, Commander Morris prepared his next move. He had already guessed that Ethan was hiding something. His men would search every room by morning. Clara knew the time to choose was close. She would either step forward and be taken, or she would fight for her own path. Ethan lay awake that night, listening to the quiet breathing of Clara as she slept on the small cot. He knew tomorrow would test them both. The secret of her bloodline was no longer safe, and the world around them was beginning to close in. The next morning came with the sound of boots striking the floor. Commander Morris had given orders for a full search. Soldiers moved through the outpost, knocking on doors, looking into every room, and questioning the staff. Ethan knew they would come to him soon. Clara sat quietly on the cot, her hands gripping the coat tighter than ever. Her eyes showed both fear and resolve. Ethan whispered that they could not stay here. Sophia came in through the side door, her face tense. She told Ethan that Morris had already planned to take Clara away. If they wanted to protect her, they had to act before the soldiers reached the room. Clara stood up, her face pale but steady. She said she was ready. She did not want to hide anymore. With Sophia guiding them, they moved through the back halls of the outpost. Ethan stayed close to Clara, making sure she did not stumble. Alarms had not been raised yet, but soldiers were everywhere. They kept their heads low, moving in silence until they reached the hangar. Sophia led them to a small shuttle she used for transport runs. She told them the engines were ready, but they had to move fast. Before they could board, soldiers entered the hangar. A short fight broke out. Ethan grabbed a toolbar from the floor and struck one of the guards. Sophia pushed another back with a shock baton. Clara, though untrained, picked up a piece of metal and swung it with all her strength. The soldiers fell back for a moment, giving them just enough time to climb into the shuttle. Sophia started the engines, and the shuttle lifted from the ground. The hangar doors opened as alarms filled the air. Shots from rifles struck the metal hull, but the shuttle broke free and flew into the open sky. Clara sat strapped in, her breathing heavy, her hands shaking. Ethan reached for her hand and told her she was safe for now. She nodded but said safety would not last. Maurice would not give up. Sophia flew them to an abandoned mining station hidden in the mountains nearby. The place was old and unused, but it offered shelter. Inside, Clara finally spoke openly. She said she understood now why her mother had placed her in the pod. She said the bloodline was never meant to hold power alone, but to test those around her. If people wanted the treasures of the old monarchy, they would have to face the choice of protecting her or exploiting her. Ethan told her that Morris only wanted power, and that many others like him would try the same. Clara nodded, her eyes sharp. She said that then it was time she stopped running. She wanted to stand as more than a key, more than a memory of the past. She wanted to stand as a voice. Sophia looked at her with respect, saying Clara had the heart of a leader, even if she did not want a throne. As night fell, they made plans. Daniel joined them, slipping away from the outpost to help. He brought supplies and news. Morris had called for reinforcements and was preparing to search beyond the outpost. Time was short. Clara listened to the reports, then surprised them all by speaking with authority. She outlined what they needed to do, giving clear orders. Though she had just awakened to this world, her words carried a weight that made others follow. Ethan saw it clearly. She was more than a frightened girl from the pod. She was someone born with the spirit of command, a leader shaped by both her past and her courage now. When she spoke, the others listened without question. He realized then that Clara did not need to claim a throne to be a queen. She already carried that strength inside her. While they prepared, Clara stood at the broken window of the mining station, looking out at the distant lights of the outpost. She whispered that tomorrow would bring a choice. She would either be taken by Morris, or she would show him and everyone else that her life was her own. Ethan stood beside her and promised she would not face it alone. She gave him a faint smile, then turned back to the darkness, ready for what was to come. The morning came with a heavy silence. Clara stood in the mining station, her hands resting on the window frame as she looked out at the valley below. The air felt still, as if the world itself was waiting. Ethan stood beside her, his chest tight with worry. Sophia and Daniel checked their supplies in the corner, their faces tense. They all knew Commander Maurice would come today. When the sun lifted higher, dust clouds appeared on the horizon. Vehicles rolled toward the station, their engines echoing across the empty land. Soldiers marched in rows behind them. Clara turned from the window, her face calm. She said this was the moment she had been waiting for. She would not run anymore. Ethan wanted to stop her, to tell her they could hide again, but her eyes told him she had made her choice. She walked to the center of the room and lifted her voice. She said they would not fight for treasure or power, but for freedom. Her words filled the cold station with warmth. Sophia and Daniel nodded. Ethan felt strength rise inside him just by listening. Soon, the station shook with the sound of engines outside. The doors burst open, and Commander Morris entered with his men. His voice was sharp as he ordered Clara to surrender. He said her bloodline was the key to wealth and power that should not be wasted. He promised her safety if she obeyed. Clara stepped forward, her coat slipping from her shoulders as she stood tall. She said she would not be used. She said the old monarchy had left behind vaults and secrets, but those things no longer mattered. She told Morris that humanity did not need gold or thrones. It needed courage, truth, and unity. Her voice was steady, strong, carrying through the station like a bell. The soldiers shifted uneasily, some lowering their weapons as her words sank in. Morris grew angry. He shouted that she had no choice. He drew his weapon and pointed it at her. Ethan stepped between them, his heart pounding. He told Morris that if he wanted to harm Clara, he would have to go through him first. Morris sneered, calling him a fool, but his hand shook slightly. Before the moment could break, Clara lifted her hand. She held a small device Ethan had seen her take from the pod. She pressed it, and a light glowed. Maurice froze, his eyes wide. He thought it was the key to the vaults. Clara spoke clearly, saying it was not a key to riches, but a destroyer. She said her mother had built it to end the bloodline's control. If it ever fell into the wrong hands, then, before anyone could stop her, she crushed it in her palm. The light flickered and went out. Morris shouted in rage, but his soldiers no longer followed his orders. Many of them stepped back, their faces uncertain. Clara's words had reached them. They saw not a girl to be used, but a leader who stood for her own freedom. Morris tried to command them again, but his voice no longer carried power. Sophia moved forward, weapon in hand, and told him it was over. He was taken away, his anger fading into silence. The station grew quiet again. Clara stood in the center, her shoulders straight, her eyes bright. Ethan looked at her with awe. She had faced fear and power without giving in. She had broken the chain of her past and chosen her own path. She was no queen on a throne, but she was a queen in spirit. That night, the four of them sat by a small fire in the mining station. The sky above was wide and full of stars. Clara spoke softly, saying the future was uncertain, but it was theirs to shape. Ethan told her she was right, and that whatever came next, she would not face it alone. Sophia and Daniel agreed, their faces calm for the first time in days. As the fire burned low, Clara lifted her eyes to the stars. She whispered that her mother's dream had ended, but something new had begun. Ethan watched her in silence, knowing that this was only the start of a greater journey. The girl he had found in the pod was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who carried not the weight of the past, but the hope of tomorrow.